A boy with 1,000 dreams. In a modest neighborhood, nestled in a quiet corner of a bustling little city, Abraham was born into a humble family. The neighborhood was filled with closely packed houses, their faded colors telling stories of time, and narrow alleys echoing with the playful shouts of children running and laughing. Meanwhile, the adults were consumed with their daily chores, each busy with their own world. Amidst this lively chaos, Abraham grew up, but he was different from the other children. While most of his peers were content with playing in the alleys or climbing trees, Abraham had a gaze that lingered longer than most. His wide, curious eyes observed every little detail around him, capturing moments others would overlook. When a singing bird flew past him, he would wonder, how does it fly like that? If he saw a man repairing a bicycle, he'd question, how do all these gears work together? Unlike the other children, Abraham never seemed to sit still. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, and his energy was boundless. While his friends chased balls down the street or played hide-and-seek in the narrow alleyways, Abraham would often climb to the rooftop of his house. There, under the vast open sky, he would gaze at the stars. Those glittering dots in the night sky fascinated him. He would stare for hours, wondering, what do the stars look like up close? Could I ever fly among them one day? His dreams were far grander than the small neighborhood that cradled him, and much bigger than the little city that surrounded him. To him, every star in the sky was a mystery waiting to be solved. Every story told by his grandfather felt like an invitation to ask more questions. As his grandfather spoke of old legends, Abraham didn't just listen. He interrupted with question after question, eager to understand every hidden meaning. At school, Abraham was not the boy racing his classmates or playing tag during recess. Instead, he sat quietly in a corner, watching everyone. He didn't see his classmates as mere playmates. He saw them as characters in a bigger story, a story he was trying to understand. He would dream of the future, picturing himself in countless roles. One day, he imagined himself as a pilot, soaring through the skies. The next day, he saw himself as an engineer, building grand structures. Sometimes, he imagined himself as a great scientist unraveling the secrets of the universe. While the other children dreamed of getting new toys or riding shiny bicycles, Abraham pondered questions much bigger than his years. What will I become when I grow up? He wondered. Where do I fit in this vast, wide world? This restless curiosity defined Abraham. It was both his greatest strength and his greatest struggle. His love for discovery burned brightly, but that fire had no direction. His heart was like a compass spinning wildly, pointing toward every possible path at once. If he walked past a street artist painting on the sidewalk, he would stop and watch. The strokes of the artist's brush entranced him. I could do that too, he thought. He imagined himself as a famous painter, his works displayed in grand galleries. The next day, he'd walk past a tailor stitching clothes, and suddenly, he would see himself designing elegant suits and dresses. When Abraham visited the doctor's clinic with his parents, he watched the doctor carefully. The calm precision with which the doctor examined patients amazed him. He imagined himself in a white coat, a stethoscope around his neck, helping people heal with a sense of quiet authority. At school, whenever his teacher stood in front of the blackboard, explaining lessons with confidence, Abraham would watch, mesmerized. He didn't see a mere teacher. He saw a figure of wisdom and respect. One day, he thought, I'll be a teacher too. I'll stand before a classroom and guide others just like this. Even farmers caught his attention. On his way to the market with his family, they would sometimes pass fields where farmers worked the land. Abraham would pause to watch them plant seeds and water the crops. He saw the rhythm of the work, the patience it required, and he dreamed of having his own farm. In his mind, he imagined himself harvesting golden fields of wheat, surrounded by the peace of nature. The day he stepped into a bookstore for the first time, his world grew even bigger. The shelves were lined with books of every size and color. To him, they looked like magical doors to other worlds. He reached for a book about space and flipped through its pages. Planets, galaxies, and distant stars filled the images, and his imagination soared. He could already see himself as an astronaut, piloting a spacecraft through the cosmos, discovering unknown worlds and carving his name into the pages of history. This was Abraham. Every person he met, every place he visited, every story he heard, each became a spark for a new dream. Each dream was bright and vivid, but none lasted long. No sooner had he decided to become a painter than a doctor caught his attention. No sooner had he dreamed of being an astronaut than a farmer's life seemed just as magical. He was like a mirror reflecting everything around him. His heart would light up with passion at every new idea, every new possibility. But as quickly as the light came, it would flicker and fade, replaced by the next dazzling dream. His boundless imagination gave him endless energy, but he lacked the focus and patience needed to follow one path all the way to the end. He was a boy with 1,000 dreams. Each dream felt as real as the stars he watched every night. Yet, like the stars, they always seemed just out of reach. Abraham grew up in a world of simple, everyday life, but his mind and heart were always chasing something greater. Every day was a chance for a new adventure. Every encounter a spark for a new idea. Each dream that floated past him called his name, and he answered every call. He couldn't resist the pull of a new passion or a fresh possibility. But this endless chase left him lost at times, like a ship at sea with no steady course. His heart was full of ambition, but he hadn't yet learned how to anchor himself to a single dream. Yet perhaps, just perhaps, that was the magic of Abraham. A boy with a heart big enough to dream of being everything all at once. If Abraham saw something that inspired him, he would chase it with all his energy. But just as quickly, he would lose interest and move on to another dream, as if the first had never existed. As the years passed, this restlessness became an inseparable part of his character. Abraham loved the idea of exploring everything, but he could never focus on one thing long enough to achieve mastery. It was as if he wanted to experience the whole world at once, without realizing that achieving dreams required patience and persistence. His love for variety was evident in his wide range of interests, particularly his passion for languages. He saw language learning as a gateway to the world, a window into different cultures. Whenever he heard someone speaking a foreign language, he was mesmerized by the rhythm and musicality of the words. Determined to learn French, he bought textbooks and language CDs, diving in with great enthusiasm. But after a few weeks, he grew frustrated with the complexity of grammar and the vast number of vocabulary words. Next, he turned to Chinese, driven by his love for Asian films and legends. He enjoyed the beginning stages, practicing how to write the intricate characters with precision. But once the learning curve steepened, his enthusiasm waned. He then shifted his attention to Spanish, drawn by its lively rhythm and seeming simplicity. The pattern repeated. Even Latin, a language used only in classical literature and research, attracted him with its air of exclusivity. But his studies of it ended just like the others. Every time he started learning a new language, Abraham felt a surge of excitement. He created detailed schedules, bought all the necessary materials, and launched himself into the process with gusto. But as soon as he encountered difficulty, tricky grammar rules or hard-to-remember words, his passion withered. His studies never went beyond basic greetings and simple phrases before he moved on to the next shiny goal. It wasn't a lack of intelligence or ability that held him back. It was a lack of discipline. He was easily bored, and when the excitement of something new faded, he moved on, chasing a fresh source of inspiration. He was always searching for shortcuts to success, hoping to learn something quickly without realizing that mastery requires years of consistent effort. As the years passed, Abraham's friends began charting clear paths for their futures. Classmates discussed their career ambitions with conviction. One aimed to become an architect, carefully studying mathematics and physics. Another dreamed of becoming a doctor, dedicating himself to biology and chemistry. A third aspired to be a lawyer, driven by a passion for justice and advocacy. But Abraham was different. When asked about his future plans, he had no answer. He loved everything and wanted to do it all. The thought of committing to one path felt like giving up on all the others. "I don't want to confine myself to just one career," he would say with sincerity. To him, choosing a single path felt like closing the door to infinite possibilities. When he graduated from high school, his friends headed off to universities or vocational programs with purpose and direction. But Abraham remained stuck in indecision. Pressured by his family, he finally enrolled in an engineering program on the advice of a relative who assured him it was a stable and lucrative field. At first, he approached engineering with his usual enthusiasm. He attended lectures, took notes diligently, and tried to master the concepts. But the complexity of mathematical formulas and physical laws soon left him drained. He didn't feel the thrill of discovery, only the weight of obligation. Disillusioned, he dropped out a few months later. Next, he tried studying literature, believing his love of reading and languages would serve him well. He enjoyed poetry and storytelling at first, but once the assignments required deep analysis and long hours of study, his interest waned. He realized that literature was not just about passion. It demanded patience and critical thinking, qualities he had never fully developed. His third attempt was in media studies, drawn by the idea of working in television or radio. But once again, he struggled with the daily grind of assignments, deadlines, and feedback. His pattern of quitting repeated itself, and by the end of his second year, Abraham left university altogether. To justify his departure, he told himself and others, "Academia isn't for me. I'll learn from life instead." But deep down, he knew it wasn't a choice born from wisdom. He had simply fled from the hard work and perseverance that success required. Out of school and unemployed, Abraham began bouncing between jobs in search of purpose. His first job was at a small grocery store, where he enjoyed stocking shelves and interacting with customers, for about 2 weeks. Soon, the repetitive tasks dulled his excitement, and he quit. He then tried working as a cook's assistant at a local restaurant. The idea of cooking delicious meals and learning new recipes appealed to him, but he grew frustrated with the discipline of the kitchen. He disliked the rigid work hours and the relentless pace. He quit after a month, telling himself he needed a job with more freedom. Next, he joined an electronics store, thinking his interest in gadgets would make it enjoyable. He liked explaining products to customers and discussing the latest technology. But when difficult customers tested his patience, he once again handed in his resignation. Over the years, Abraham cycled through countless jobs. He tried carpentry, but the physical labor wore him down. He tried photography, drawn by the idea of creativity and self-expression, but lost motivation when he realized it required technical skills and practice. He worked briefly as a delivery driver, but hated the pressure of tight schedules. Each time he left a job, he comforted himself with the idea that he was searching for his passion. But in truth, he was running from responsibility. While his friends climbed their career ladders, Abraham remained stuck in the same loop of unfinished beginnings. Some friends became doctors, engineers, and successful entrepreneurs. Others got married, started families, and built stable lives. Abraham watched it all from the sidelines, aware of his own stagnation but unsure how to break free. One cold winter night, Abraham sat alone in his small, dimly lit room. It was his 30th birthday, but there was no celebration. His bookshelf was cluttered with half-read books, each one a monument to an abandoned dream. His desk was littered with old notebooks filled with goals he had never pursued. As he stared at the clutter around him, a wave of regret washed over him. Tears welled up in his eyes. "How did I get here?" he muttered. Where did all those years go? He reflected on his past, the wild dreams, the endless new beginnings, and the cycle of quitting. For the first time, he faced an uncomfortable truth. It wasn't the world that had failed him. It was his own lack of discipline. But then, an idea sparked within him. Perhaps it wasn't too late. Perhaps he could change. The calendar on the wall showed that the new year was only days away. He thought, if I can start fresh, why not start now? That night, he picked up a notebook and wrote down 3 goals for the coming year. They were small but clear. One goal, however, stood out: master a language completely. This time, he chose Spanish, a language he had always loved. But unlike his past attempts, he committed fully. He enrolled in a proper course, set a strict daily schedule, and stuck to it. He practiced listening, speaking, reading, and writing. He watched Spanish shows, listened to Spanish songs, and read simple Spanish books. Day after day, he stayed consistent. 6 months later, something remarkable happened. He didn't quit. He could hold basic conversations in Spanish. Motivated by his success, he kept going. Within a year, he became fluent. For the first time in his life, he had finished what he started. This momentum changed everything. He got a job as a junior translator, working with Spanish-speaking clients. Encouraged by his progress, he started learning English next, following the same strategy of discipline and consistency. By age 35, Abraham was fluent in 3 languages. He became a respected translator, known for his dedication and precision. No longer the man of many beginnings, Abraham had finally become a man of completion. One day, standing on stage to speak about his journey, he gazed at the crowd. "The biggest mistake of my life," he said, "was believing success comes from chasing every new thing. The truth is, success comes from commitment. Not from doing everything, but from choosing one thing and doing it well." The audience nodded in quiet understanding. For many of them, Abraham's story was their own. They saw themselves in his restless beginnings and found hope in his transformation. "Discipline," Abraham said with a smile, "isn't a cage that confines you. It's the key that sets you free." The turning point. The hall was filled with quiet murmurs as the audience eagerly awaited the speaker. Moments later, Abraham stepped onto the stage. His eyes reflected the weight of a journey few had witnessed, but many would soon understand. With a deep breath, he gazed at the crowd and began. "I know how it feels to be lost. To wake up every day with no sense of purpose, no direction, and to wonder if it's even worth it to try again. For years, I was that person. I chased every fleeting passion, hoping it would lead me somewhere, anywhere but here. But every road I took brought me right back to where I started, lost and exhausted." The room grew still, and every eye was fixed on him. There was something about his voice, a raw honesty that struck a chord in the hearts of his listeners. Abraham continued, his tone more intense now, each word landing like a stone in a quiet pond. "You see, I believed the lie that passion was something you find. I thought one day it would knock on my door like an unexpected guest, and everything would suddenly make sense. But passion isn't found. Passion is made. It's crafted with consistency, with patience, with grit. It's born from doing the hard things, not running from them. It's the result of showing up every single day, even when it feels pointless." He paused, letting his words sink in. People nodded slowly, their expressions shifting from curiosity to reflection. Abraham leaned forward, his eyes scanning the crowd with quiet resolve. "Here's the truth," he said, his voice steady but powerful. "If you feel lost right now, if you think it's too late, I'm here to tell you this. It's never too late. Change doesn't have a deadline. It doesn't matter if you failed once, twice, or 100 times. What matters is that you get up one more time than you fall. Applause broke out, soft at first but growing louder with each second. Abraham raised a hand to quiet them, and with a smile of quiet understanding, he continued. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. They don't exist. Start now. Start messy. Start unsure. Start scared. But just start. You won't always feel ready, but readiness is a myth. Progress doesn't wait for courage. It comes to those who move despite their fear. As his words echoed in the air, a young man from the crowd approached him after the session. His eyes shimmered with hope and newfound courage. Your story moved me, Abraham, he said, his voice filled with emotion. I thought I was the only one who felt lost, but now I know I'm not. I'm going to start over. No more waiting. Abraham placed a firm hand on the young man's shoulder, his smile filled with quiet pride. Good, he said. Start today, not tomorrow. Focus on one step, not the whole staircase. You'll be amazed at how far you can go if you just keep moving forward. That night, as Abraham walked out of the hall, his heart felt lighter. The echoes of applause had faded, but he knew his message had been planted in the hearts of those who needed it most. The young man's words replayed in his mind, and with each step he took, he remembered his own journey. He smiled to himself, knowing that for every person willing to start over, there's a chance to rewrite the story. Success, he thought, isn't about how many times you start. It's about how many times you finish.